Mayor Pro Tem, council members. Sitting in the back listening to all of your remarks, I immediately began to regret my decision to volunteer for this committee. And I also began to question my decision to volunteer to present this presentation. But I did volunteer to do this for one reason, and that's because I live in the city, and I ride my bike in the city, and I run into citizens, my neighbors in the city, and they ask me the same things that they ask all of you. I thought you worked with the city. What are you guys doing about all this property, and what's the plan? And we can't have a city that looks like that. So we got our committee together, and I spent a lot of time doing a lot of research, watching Tiger baseball games at night, reading agricultural blogs, dragging my girlfriend around on the weekends, driving through all parts of the city and looking at, really trying to think about, what can we do about this? Because it doesn't look good, it's not fair to the citizens, but understanding that we have a limited budget, we have limited staff, but as Councilman Ball said a couple of meetings ago, we got to start to think outside of the box, and it's cliche to sort of say that, but you really do need to look at different approaches to tackling problems with limited budgets. Otherwise, you're just going to end up chasing your tail, and nothing ever seems to get accomplished. So I started with some research. So let's dive in, because this is I think a 75-page PowerPoint presentation. And I know everybody would like to get out of here before midnight. So, okay. And, I was telling the Saginaw News, because they were trying to get the scoop on this story. And I actually found myself getting excited talking about this, because I think there is a solution, and I think there's a better way to do it. There are 23,000 residential parcels in the city of Saginaw. And these numbers are just round numbers. I like to keep numbers rounded so you guys can get the numbers in your mind. I mean, each one of those gray squares represents a single-family home. In 2014, there were 320 foreclosed homes in the city of Saginaw and 124 foreclosed lots. And I should also mention that we tried to print this presentation out. It kept crashing all of the printers in City Hall, crashed the printers at Saginaw Future. So we'll provide an electronic copy to you, because I think there's some useful information that you can provide to the citizens. So vacant lots, now this isn't even considering parks or commercial space or land bank, industrial space or racer trust property. Just single family vacant lots, there's 4,700, close to 5,000. This is the density. So Klopsick and I, we're computer geeks, and we like mapping things so that you can get a good visual representation. You erase the dots and you just start to look at the concentration and the density of where things are. There are 2,600 land bank lots, the land bank density. Rental properties in the city of Saginaw. And this was shocking to me to see how many. Now, it's not all bad news. There's the rental density. There's owner-occupied housing. So I was equally encouraged by the number of owner-occupied houses, throughout the entire city. And I think, every area of the city, even the green zone, the northeast side, has a good, stable residential property with homeowners that care about what their neighborhood looks like. The owner-occupied density, active water accounts. And so this may be the best representation to really see where people are living, whether they're renting or owning or what's happening. You know that their water accounts are active. This is something, I kind of got myself involved in another issue that was the school closing. They were debating, should we close Saginaw High, should we close Arthur Hill? And of course that turned into a big discussion citywide. And so I went back and went to the most recent census data for the school district, and I started to provide them with some useful information about, people are have left the state of Michigan over the past decade. I mean, this is, again, as the manager pointed out, this is not a problem unique to the city of Saginaw. I mean, the governor has a plan to try and, recruit new residents to the state of Michigan in general. So these represent the percentage loss. And to me, if you look at, like, especially the northeast side, everything north of 75 there, to see nearly a 60% loss in population in 50 years is pretty astounding if you think about it. Here are the actual numbers lost, so percentages versus numbers, which is actual numbers. And incidentally, those little dots on there, the green schools are the open schools, and then the triangles are the closed schools. So trying to figure out where all of our kids are going to be going to school if we're closing a lot of these school buildings. So the history, and when I do a PowerPoint presentation, I don't like words. You guys can all read all of this information. I think pictures do a better job of representing information. But important to note here, in 2004, we did 1,000 cuts roughly, 1,000 lawns cut in the city of Saginaw. And Phil Carwatt was just needling me back there and said, make sure you tell them and point out, and I think this has got a pointer here. You can't really see it on there. 12,000 lots in 2012 were cut. So we went from 1,000 to 12,000. That's a significant increase in the number of lots cut. So now we kind of know where the vacant lots are. We know how many lots the city was trying to cut or the land bank was trying to cut. Now let's start to put some dollar figures to it, because everything costs money, and of course that's where the real tail is. I put some variable costs there associated with crews. These again are round numbers, and there's a lot of different factors that go into them. But so we have a contractor, which represents the most expensive. The city gets to divest themselves of all administration, so they get to save more money that way. The city has some additional maintenance of lawnmower equipment and those kinds of things, so that's represented by the $25 an hour. And then minimum, like if you were just going to hire temporary people to cut grass, that's where the 15 comes from. So if you wanted to cut just the land bank owned lots just once, one time around, you can see the numbers, $130,000, $65,000, and $39,000. So we know how many lots there are, how many land bank lots there are in the city of Saginaw. We know how much it costs to cut those lots. So this is a little chart that shows contractor, city cost, or just a temporary employee to cut those lots. Once a month, twice a month, once a week, twice a week. And if you really want to do a good job and have it manicured like you all probably keep your lawns, once a week is probably the minimum. And you can see the cost there. And the land bank properties, just the residential properties, probably represent half of the true vacant properties in the city of Saginaw. So, once a week at, say the city cost is $1.3 million annually, just burning through salaries to pay people. If you want to cut all of the vacant lots, not just the city-owned vacant lots, again, your contractor, city, and minimum costs, just one time around, you can see the numbers. And here's all of the lots. If you want to cut all the lots in the city of Saginaw that are vacant, you can see the cost. So even once a month is not attainable from a cost perspective. It's just cost prohibitive to cut grass. So, I was driving. I think this is on Harold Street, and I was walking around Harold Street and thinking, well, what is the conclusion then? If it's going to cost that much money to cut the grass, there has to be there's got to be a solution. And what it dawned on me was that grass cutting is not the answer. And I know that sounds trite to say that, but the property never looks good. It doesn't look good when citizens come to you and they come to me when I'm at Kroger trying to buy, eggs and stuff for when I'm shopping on Sunday morning. It doesn't look good after the city or the land bank cuts it, because all of the grass is cut and laid on the grass and it's on the sidewalk and it's all over the roads. Nor does it look good while it's growing again, because it gets to be 3 feet high by the time that they make another pass and the grass is cut. I mean, at no point in the continuum does the grass ever look good. And it does make us feel better, and I'm guilty of calling the city clerk's office myself and making anonymous tips from properties in my neighborhood when I ride my bike and I see the grass that's not mowed, because it upsets me to see that in my neighborhood. So where do you start? I mean, that's a pretty negative synopsis of the problem. And you start with the new demolitions. Congressman Kildee was very proactive. He's a guy that's been in the trenches. He came from the Genesee County Land Bank and recognized that cities needed money to clean up vacant property. The precipitous fall in property values demanded that we have some resources to help demolish some of these homes because we're losing population so quickly. These are the old style demolitions. I call them the driveways to nowhere. When you drive, and I've driven every square inch of the city, you see these driveways, and it's a reminder that a home used to be there and families used to be there, and now it's a depressing reminder that those times are gone. So to start the process, you start removing the driveway approaches and the driveways to nowhere, and repairing the curb and gutter and the sidewalk. And the difference, although it is subtle, if you do drive down these roads, and they're just beginning this new spec for the city, but specifically in the Saginaw High neighborhood, Roberts Ray, Ruckold, Harold, the difference is noticeable, and you can see the improvement. You eliminate the reminder that this is a driveway to nowhere. This is a home that has been abandoned. This is a lot that's been abandoned. It looks a little bit strange to have such large parcels in a traditional city where you would see 60 by 120 lots, but if somebody takes it over or it's well maintained, it doesn't look like it's abandoned, and it goes a long way to improving the overall aesthetics of neighborhoods. So if you remove all that infrastructure, and that also creates a huge problem. You mentioned people backing their pickup trucks into driveways. They're using those as ramps to dump their old tires and their couches and refrigerators. So removing that makes it more difficult as well. So what do you do with this grass that grows 3 and 4 feet high? 2 years ago, I had the flu during Christmas, and I actually met with Mr. Hosbeck, and he was talking to me about farmers and what farmers do to maintain their properties. I bought a bag of seeds on Amazon for, I think, $7.99, and I went over to Hess and I forget the cross street, and I found a lot that had just been scraped on a Saturday, and it was raining, and I took my bag of seeds and I spread the clover seeds over the lot on Hess Street, and this is what it produced. Clover is a plant that farmers use. It's called a nitrogen fixer because it takes atmospheric nitrogen and it captures it, digests it, and then it organically puts it into the soil, and that's why farmers use it, because that's the primary ingredient in fertilizer. It looks nice, it's green, and it doesn't grow taller than 6 inches. That being said, any native or bioremediation species works. Bioremediation is a plant that people plant in order to, the roots digest contaminants. In Fukushima, Japan, where they had the big nuclear reactor, they're planting hectares of sunflowers because it's sucking up the radioactive material and storing it in the plant so that it's not contaminating the soil in the surrounding areas. They did it at Chernobyl. And they do it in areas where there has been, the EPA is doing it in test sites. So Klopsic is a big fan. He wants to try wildflowers. But it's just yet another example of something that you can do that's low cost, that will cover the ground but won't grow to a certain height. Ultimately, the long-term solution is reforestation of parts of the city, of vacant lots. We were the White Pine Valley 150 years ago, and that was what was here before we got here. And these trees provide shade, cover, protection against soil erosion. They're native to this area. That's what was here before. You know, grass is an invasive species. This is something that we brought over here and planted, and the need to maintain and to water it. It's not what was here beforehand. The same thing occurs in the public right-of-way. You talk about corridors and driving to Buena Vista. It is embarrassing, you know, when you have family. When I have family that come in to see me, and they drive down Court Street, or they drive over the Court Street Bridge, and you see all these maintenance issues, whether it's a boulevard in the middle of the street or if it's an abandoned parcel in the neighborhoods. So finding, these are cedar trees, again, native to the area, but they provide good cover, and they're appealing to look at, and they're very low maintenance. So part of this, the demolition contract, the 11.2 million, we're implementing some of these strategies. It's 10 cents per square foot to seed it. Concrete removal is 50 cents per square foot. It's pretty inexpensive because they recycle it and use it as road aggregate material for MDOT projects. The curb and gutter replacement, that's a little pricey. I mean, that's skilled trades. That is, you know, getting a crew out there and forming it up and pouring it, and it takes some skill. So that is a cost associated with it. Lots are 60 by 20. That's virtually all the lots in the city, or a majority of them. The estimate to seed it and to repair the curb and gutter is about $1,500. We think we can knock that seeding cost down. We're experimenting with overseeding, so not scraping all of the grass away, but just scatter casting seed on the grass once it's cut. It does work. I walked around my house. I just recently sold my house, and I saw this giant patch of clover in my backyard, and the grass there was a third the size of the grass that didn't have clover. So the clover chokes out some of the water and doesn't allow the grass to grow. This is an important factor. These practices that we're talking about are being used all over the country. And it's not just because people don't have the resources to mow the grass. They do it in California because they're conserving water. They do it in Colorado because they're sick of polluting the rivers and the streams with herbicides and pesticides from lawns. It's a huge problem out west. People that are so inclined have a notion to restore the natural habitat the way it was before we introduced all of these species. Many people now, there's a whole vein of gardeners that are doing this because it's aesthetically pleasing. And then there's yet a whole other group. The city of New York and the city of Los Angeles are trying to plant 1 million trees in those two cities over the next several years because it helps to control the temperature of the urban core. Some of the wealthiest communities in the nation are trying this ecological approach. This is Boulder, Colorado. And it also happens to be one of the most cost-effective. This is a really expensive neighborhood in California. Those are native grass species, and they do that to control soil erosion. This is a township directly to the west of us. So, yes, okay, it's fine to say, let's go to California, let's look what they're doing in Colorado, but let's look what they're doing in our own backyard. Let's benchmark ourselves against other townships that are adjacent to us. This is Washtenaw County, home of the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, a very wealthy community with a lot of resources. This is an intersection at a major road in that community. This is a project they're doing again in Washtenaw County to restore native prairie grasses in the public right-of-way because it's a habitat for native species. This is also in Washtenaw County, so a treatment along a right-of-way. They do cut the right-of-way so that there's clear vision, but beyond, say, 4 or 5, 6 feet, the natural order of things is allowed to take over. This is something that I think is, again, an important piece of information, or something that I came to the conclusion, is that the city is trying to hold itself to an impossible standard. Now, I don't cut grass. I don't budget for people that cut grass. I don't have a stake in the game other than the fact that I live in the city. This is something that I care about. This is something that's been on my mind. This is something that I'm, again, dragging my girlfriend driving around the city on Saturday afternoon trying to come up with a solution. This is this is going to be difficult to see, but this is I looked this up on the SEV. This is a house out in A Township. This is a $300,000 home, and the grass directly to the left of the picture is approximately 3 feet tall next to those bushes. This is on another street in the township, the lots are allowed to grow as they are naturally without, now I don't know this for a fact, but it doesn't appear to me that there is any control. There doesn't seem to be any control on what's being planted or how it's being maintained. The grasses in this slide are approximately 3.5 feet tall next to a $250,000 home, again, in a neighboring community. New build, new construction, beautiful homes, really expensive, and they've got looks to me like a little bit of a wetland next door with frogs and tadpoles and all kinds of critters living next door. I won't bore you with all of the details. This is a picture I took of my lawn. There's a lot of people that are really ecologically minded, and they're sowing, overseeding their lawns with clover because, again, it eliminates the need, or it reduces the need for watering. It reduces the need for herbicide. It eliminates herbicides and pesticides. So we kind of know all this background information. We know the budget. We know how much it costs. We know how many parcels there are. So what do we do? Well, the first thing that you do is, our customers are the residents. So the people that approach me at Kroger, or that approach Councilman O'Neill probably when he's trying to get out of work and go home and have dinner, they ask us questions and they want to know what our plan is. They cited the 1 week, 1 street. I know that the land bank is going to fund and to help to fund getting a budget together for some kids in the Saginaw High neighborhood to help those kids take an ownership in their neighborhood. And so not only do you get some of the residential parcels cut, but you also encourage civic engagement, hard work. You work, you get paid. There's a lot of good things that can come from engaging the community, especially when we're talking about trying to be good servants. We wrote a grant to the Department of Justice, and we wrote Renee Johnson from the Community Foundation, Lieutenant Kajorski there in the back, and we wrote a grant, so hopefully we'll hear later on this winter. But a part of that, we put in a maintenance program where we could pay and reward kids in the neighborhoods for helping to take care of properties and to listen to their ideas. I'm not saying that these are the end-all, be-all, and this is research that I've done, contacted MSU because they have a great agriculture department, talked to various people in the agricultural world, talked to people at Clucks, did a whole lot of reading, but engaging the residents and finding out what they want. If they want a park in the middle of Harold and Ray, let's find some property and let's get that over to the residents' hands and make it happen. Number 2, this is a 5-point plan, in case you're counting. This is Howard Street in 2008. My dad grew up on Howard Street. The side lot program, I think, is something that's under talked about and is a huge part of to getting the property in the homes of in the hands of the people that are living there day to day. This is Howard Street in 2014. So you could see 2008, 2014, that's a substantial improvement in the overall look and appeal of this neighborhood. And it's because the land bank sold this property to the owner next door, who now maintains it as their own yard, or their own property. The land bank has 1,500 parcels that are adjacent to owner-occupied housing. So through the computer program, Klopsick and I, we identified every single parcel that's owned by the land bank that's adjacent to an owner-occupied home. And the potential is there to obviously expand the ownership of the neighborhood by getting these properties into the hands of the people, again, that live and work there every day. So everybody wants to know what we are going to cut, what we're proposing to cut. The public right-of-ways need to be maintained for clear vision so that you can see when you're driving down the road, so that the sidewalks are open. There's 5,000 public right-of-ways in the city of Saginaw. It takes approximately 8 minutes to cut one of those. Carwatt and Stemple went out and actually got 2 tractors and raced each other to see how much grass they could cut and how experience the kind of challenges that the employees have when they're trying to maintain the properties, to really, put their money where their mouth is, so to speak, so that they were in the trenches and trying to figure out, exactly how we can do this better. $20,000 per pass, that's what it's going to cost, roughly. That's an estimate. So, 5,000 lots, one crew can cut 60 lots a day. You got 1 through 5 options there for the number of crews to put into place. Obviously, 5 crews can cut 300 lots a day. That means that these crews can get to the public right-of-way every 17 days. Now, that's an estimate. That's assuming tractors aren't breaking down, or they run over a tire or something and then they have to change the blade, or there'll be a lot of variables. But that's essentially what the estimates are. This is a point which Mayor Pro Tem O'Neill rightly brought up. The city, obviously, you all are the ones that people come to because you are the leaders of the city. But it is right and just to point out that the land bank is the owner of these properties. They have some responsibility to come to the table and partner with the city of Saginaw, because the city of Saginaw can't do it alone, and it's their property. That being said, it isn't something that they sought out. They didn't acquire these actively, and it's a tough situation. They're properties that maybe nobody wants, so who is going to maintain them? But the land bank has been a good and valuable partner in providing administration, demos, dollars for maintenance, and especially some funding for new and innovative solutions. But I don't blame Councilman O'Neill, because I think when we go out and we tell this story to the neighborhood groups, as we talk about that community engagement process, and we need to be honest with them about our abilities, about whose responsibility it is, and that the land bank is the owner, not the city, but that we're trying to come up with a solution because we care what the neighborhoods look like. So the 4th step in the process is to continue all of these new specs for all of the new demos. So if we would have started this maybe 10 years ago, and we nobody, I think, could have thought the scope of this problem 10 years ago. I mean, if we could have, we all would be millionaires because we'd all own Starbucks stock or Google stock. But now we know what the problem is. We know about some different ways to approach it. If we continue that approach, we're going to take 1,000 properties that we're doing through the demo process and remove them from the maintenance if we do it right, if we have a good approach. And if we plant some clover or native grasses or oak or birch or pine or whatever those native species are, that will work for our program. Now, I went out this weekend. I drove my favorite spot in the city to highlight this problem is on Phelan and Ward. So Saturday morning, I got my girlfriend out of bed and I said, let's go take a bike ride. And we rode down to Phelan and Ward, and I didn't have a ruler, forgot to bring a ruler. So a dollar bill is 6 inches long. That is a dollar bill stuck in the corner of Phelan and Ward. I think this corner is the southwest corner. Across kitty corner is the old style demolition. So that was the new style demolition. This is the other corner of Phelan and Ward. The grass is 4 feet tall. No watering, no maintenance, no nothing, but the difference is just how you approach it. It could be 5 inches or it could be 4 feet, depending on how you treat the problem. So the next step would be to go back and bring the previous demo. So all of these have been demolished over time. Let's start to go back and address all of these properties and see if we can get them brought back up to our current standards and make them look presentable. So this is my cliche about a dog chasing his tail. But it dawned on me when we even had internal arguments within our committee about how do we do this, and whose fault is it, and how do we do a better job? And we're just simply chasing our own tail. You can't have 5,000 vacant lots, and at the rate that grass grows, it's a problem that is not sustainable. The approach to cutting grass is not sustainable. There's got to be a better way to approach the process, and the new demos are working. The new lots, when you go, especially Harold, Roberts, Ray, Ruckel, those properties look 10 times better than they do in other parts of the city before we had the new specs. It is working. Although slow, it is working. This is Wadsworth in 2008. This is Wadsworth in 2014. We still do have problems, but this corner looks better than it did in 2008, much as Howard Street did in the previous slides I showed. This may be what Wadsworth looks in 2018 as we start to begin to plant trees and ground cover to cover it. This is probably my favorite example. It'll be your favorite example because I'm almost done with my presentation. This is 4th and Kirk in 2008. Looks pretty bad. It was a pretty bad spot for a number of years. This is in 4th and Kirk in 2013. It's beginning to take on the appearance of the natural state of things beyond what our human involvement has been, and it is beginning to look better. And to Councilman Ball's comment, this could be 4th and Kirk in 2018. If we begin to remove some of that underutilized infrastructure, to clear away the broken sidewalks, to plant some nice low-growing native species, and allow the trees to grow over, it looks. And I tell people, I drive in some parts. I've driven a lot around the northeast side. There are a lot of areas of the northeast side that are more appealing to me from an aesthetic standpoint than some of the neighborhoods where we have this grass growing and cutting and grass growing and cutting. It looks natural. It looks like you're out in the country. Now, I'm not exactly a country boy. I grew up in the city. But those areas of the northeast side, some of those that have begun to go back to nature look a heck of a lot better than some of the lots that we've been trying to maintain. So just to wrap up, these are our 5 steps that we're going to try and take to address this problem. The one is probably the most critical. Get out to the neighborhoods, go to all the neighborhood associations, do this presentation, talk to them about their concerns, talk to them about the possible solutions, come up with ideas, fund different ideas, seek funds for different ideas, implement the side lot program, try and get the ownership back into the hands of the citizens, cut the right-of-ways, continue the new demo process, and go back and fix all of the old demos. And so that concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to bring Phil Carwood up here to answer all of the tough questions, which I'm sure you all have.
And we'll start with Councilman Balls.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Fine job. Good to see you doing some good work. But anyway, some comments I got to probably maybe we can help out. If those lots are empty, no one is paying their taxes, am I right?
That's right.
Why don't we give them away and let somebody pay the taxes on them? I mean, that's one thing we can think about. Why charge somebody for a lot that's they're going to put it next to their house and going to make it look better? Give them the lot and get a few dollars for it. Then we have to worry about putting no clover on. Let them cut the grass and make it look nice. That's one idea. The land bank really don't want this land. No. The land bank will take a house.
They will take anything because in their mind, and the reason why the legislation was put in place or came up with is because to create local control. So it was either going to speculators who would buy up all these houses and try and rent them out or sell them or get insurance claims on them, or they're going to the DNR, the Department of Natural Resources. And the DNR was a huge state organization that really had no local effect. And so land banks were put in place so that at least we could have some local control and local input over what happens to the properties.
Do you have any idea how much the land bank in Saginaw is worth? The Saginaw County Land Bank?
They're a function of the Saginaw County government.
Yes.
They, I don't know what their budget is. I think they collect 50% of the taxes for 5 years on the properties that they sell. They do have a small budget, but I'm not sure what it is.
I'm just saying, it seems like it'd be better for them to give the lots away and let the people take care of them.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you. In fact, we are pushing the land bank to make that transition. You know, there's no point in the land bank holding onto these properties if they don't want them, and they clearly don't. Let's get them into the residents' hands. And yeah, I think currently they charge $300 because they charge for the title search and some miscellaneous fees. But is there a way that we could reduce the cost so that we could get them in the hands quicker of the residents, and that way we have a better situation?
As I yeah.
Trying to set up a meeting with the county treasurer and the county board chair for the mayor and the mayor pro tem to meet with them, and I think that'd be a great opportunity to bring these kind of ideas to those two, and hopefully we could affect some change that way. So if you have ideas like that, you could either send them to Debbie Buck and she can summarize them for the mayor, mayor pro tem for that meeting, or you can give them directly to those two gentlemen as well.
Okay. Thank you. I have any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Ball, that 300 is now at 100.5. We've got a garage sale going on. Mr. Miller mentioned there's 1,500 lots adjacent to homeowners. So here's 1,500 possible people that can say, yes, I'll give you 100.5 for that. And then they can improve their property. So that's an option. But Tom, I would like to make a suggestion. The last master plan, which wasn't too very long ago, we identified an area we called the green zone. Like most documents like that, they're tools for future development. In this case here, I think it's time that we implemented part of that master plan, particularly the green zone. And I'm not suggesting the entire green zone, but I believe the land bank owns at least half the properties in there that are vacant.
I'd say roughly, yeah.
Which is a guesstimation. That would be a good place to isolate. We reduce the lighting, we reduce the roads, we reduce the cleaning, the snow plowing, and let everything go back to natural. That area, if we're lucky enough to get some severe spiking of our economic development, would be an ideal industrial park. But until that happens, we cannot afford to maintain it. We're having difficulty with the status quo. I'm not suggesting that the savings from there would be adequate enough to handle everything else. That would be too monumental to expect. But I really believe that area being isolated wherever possible could save us some money.
Yeah, and I guess in trying to come up with a plan, and looking at all those dots and driving around those neighborhoods and seeing old ladies sitting on their porch in the northeast side, it was, at least in my mind, trying to develop an approach that was cost effective, that could be done throughout the city, that would treat everyone fairly and equitably, without, we talk about abandoning parts of the city, and it sounds like a good idea, and I think, to some extent it may be, but, as Phil Carwatt and I have talked about, you've got infrastructure there that is water mains, and Phil's an engineer, I'm a novice, but you just can't have dead-end water mains that dead end, and then you got stagnant water, and to remove that infrastructure, the cost to loop it and to go back. To me, a better approach is to let the natural order of things take over. Like I said, the northeast side is actually some of the nicest property in the city of Saginaw. You drive around, there's a guy that has built a pole barn there. He's got a farm, essentially. He's got a little tractor. He's growing vegetables. So, rather than just saying, well, we're just going to abandon parts of the city, yeah, you can say we're not going to go out and replace streetlights if they get knocked over. But having an approach to manage and to try some different things that are cost-effective and equitable across the city, I think is a good approach. Your point is well taken in the fact that we do need to look at how the resources are allocated and spread out all over the place, and shrinking budgets. How do we best manage those activities? And Councilman Balls said it a couple meetings ago about, can you mill up the pavement in some of the abandoned streets and use gravel? And Phil's taken a look at some of, I don't want to talk for Phil. I like talking about, I'll talk too much. But to come up with a solution that is across the board, cost effective, and that can be implemented no matter if you live on Adams Boulevard or the northeast side or Saginaw High. It's an approach I think that'll work across the city, and I think it's doable.
Well, there was a lot of talk went in before we realized that would be a green area. Your father would remember it.
Mm-hmm.
And he's almost as smart as you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Yeah, Councilman Fitzpatrick, next, and we'll move Councilman Moore back after that.
I just want to say thank you, Tom, and also thanks Phil too, but I wanted to say that my wife did point out a number of places that you just said that she's, now look at this. These people are really trying here. They've got a garden going here. They got a community garden. They've got wildflowers growing. Some excellent things. She said, this is where, we really, these people deserve, our help. So I just want to say, I agree with you, and I better agree with you, because otherwise I got to answer to somebody. But one of the things I've noticed in our native, you're talking about native grasses and clover and that kind of thing, and I guess I'd like, do we do this already with our new demos? Are we?
Yes.
We are putting clover.
That's part of the new specs, yep.
Okay. How much is that clover?
It's 10 cents square foot.
Okay. So, and that's,
Yeah.
that's a good,
I think we could probably get better. Now, what the other side of the coin I didn't tell you about my clover story is that it's right next to Tim Hosbeck's pickle factory, and I got some bad seeds because it grew 6 feet high of some kind of yellow flower. And he said, "What kind of clover seeds did you buy? Those aren't this." But they knocked it down, and I think they threw some weeds in there for me. But I think as we just started this process, but and I was talking to my dad earlier, and I said, we really need to investigate micro clover, because now they have miniature clover that only grows 2 inches high instead of 6 inches high. So and the presentation was long enough, but we're going to try a number of different creative solutions in different neighborhoods. And we're going to kind of leave that up to the neighborhood groups. You've got a vacant parcel on Adams Boulevard. Do you want it full of wood chips? Do you want it full of wildflowers? Do you want sunflowers? Do you want clover? Do you want ivy? What would you like to see there? What would you like tried? Would you like pine trees? Something. So.
Well, and you just, that is the last thing I wanted to say, because on my property, years ago, my son brought home a couple of white pine seedlings.
Saplings, yep.
Planted them, and now, 18 years later, they're 20 feet tall.
Yep.
And I've never done anything to them.
Mm-hmm.
They just take, they say, well, we're natural here and we're going to go.
They cost $1
Yeah,
per sapling.
right. That's pretty incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible. Anyway, thank you.
Councilwoman Moore?
I got a question. Where is the green zone? I keep hearing about the green zone. What is the green zone? Is it just on the east side? Is there a green zone on the west side? Or is that a brown zone? So I'm not trying to be funny, but I know, and if it's where I think it is, there's still residents staying there.
14th to the east.
So therefore, they've been there for years. So if we're gonna tear down or go in and ask them to give them a comfortable price for their housing, I wanna know where the green zone is. I've heard about the red zone in the city of Saginaw. Now I'm hearing about a green zone. Okay.
And that was something that was identified in the master plan, and it was because there was such a significant loss of population in one given area. And I don't want to bore everybody with the details, but when they put in the federal highway system,
Right.
they drew that line, a 675, and it was such an awful thing that they did to the city of Saginaw. And it's the reason why the federal government came up with the Uniform Relocation Act, where you have to actually think about things before you go in and run a highway through people's neighborhoods, because before that was there, you had neighborhoods that were totally bisected. But because that was cut off, there's been a huge loss in population. This isn't an active strategy to try and get people out of their homes in the northeast side. In fact, the land bank is giving property to several churches in the northeast side. But it was a way of saying this is a transitioning area because so many people are leaving, and trying to encourage density in the city. So to try and get people to live in areas where there's population so they can support one another, and so that you can have, it is a shame that happened, and that's kind of the thing. And as Larry said, Councilman Caloris, there's a whole explanation in the master plan, and we can probably show you all kinds of maps of the northeast side and what the story is there.
Councilman Ball, you do have a question?
No, sir.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. I not only want to thank Tom, but John.
Yep.
I can't imagine I would have loved to live in all this traffic.
That would have been fun. I think it would be interesting, because I find that to be intriguing, that we have people in our employ who are willing to try different ideas and to test things on their own. I mean, I think that's tremendous, because that's how things are going to get resolved. So thanks to all of you. But I like this plan because it's a plan. It gives us something to explain to our residents, and not only to our residents, but anybody who will listen, that we're not ignoring the problem. We know it's there, but this PowerPoint expresses, not only to the residents, but to the press and anybody else who will listen, that there's a reason we can't do this anymore. It's futile. You look at the numbers, you look at what we're doing, and there's what's the cliche? if you keep beating your head up against the wall, you know, I mean, well, that's what we're doing. We're beating our head against the wall with grass cutting. There's no two ways about it. And if we keep doing it, then we're just plain stupid. So the bottom line is we have to come up with something different. This is a great approach. It isn't necessarily, as you mentioned, the end-all be-all, but it's an approach that we can work on until we come up with something better. The other thing that I think we have to recognize is this is not something that'll be done in one season. It will take years, many seasons, to really start seeing a good result. We're getting hints of it, like you mentioned, some of the things you saw. It's hints of where we can go. But there's huge potential as we start following the plan to figure out other things. You could even get into urban farming. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities, not just with plants, but even with animals. You know, in Detroit, we had a guy who tried to use goats. Well, it sounds silly, but who knows? I mean, if we're smart enough to try things, then there's options. What I'm really talking about is what you're doing, the cultivation of ideas, cultivation of options. You know, whether it's large lots, or even fields. You know, you might be able to develop that. You might be able to take a strategic road out and give a neighbor a larger lot. There's different things that can be done, but it's all incremental. And again, it's not overnight. It's not one season. It's a plan that's developing, and as long as we have a plan, we can amend it, we can improve it, we can work with it. So I'm very, very happy to see what you've done. And it's some startling information that you just provided us, really startling. That is a side light. There's all kinds of small, low-growing things. If there's one thing I have trouble in my lawn with, it's violets. Who doesn't? Put violets out there and they'll take over. You know, and that's this high. There's all kinds of things. There's sweet woodruff. There's tons of ground cover that will do a tremendous job. Mix them, match them, but give it a chance. If you can go to the micro clover, I think it's a wonderful idea. So, by the way, it would have been Timothy that you planted by mistake, which to a farmer is a great thing.
Right.
But to the field, it wasn't here. But anyway, I applaud you. I'm glad to see this, and I'm all for developing this kind of plan and getting it to the residents. Every neighborhood association needs to see this. And we need a lot of people at those neighborhood associations. Anybody who's complaining about our failure to mow needs to see this. Because the reality is we're beating our head against the wall. That's all I have. Thank you.
Councilman, or Mayor Pro Tem.
Mayor, thank you very much. Mr. Miller, a couple things. First of all, I'd like to thank you for sharing this information. It was very enlightening. And second of all, I appreciate your honesty and your candor, okay? I appreciate that, you know, because, you know, many times when you have issues like this, you know, we'll have someone come up and point fingers at everybody else, okay? But you were very straightforward, you're candid about the issues, and I actually like the plan. You know, I do. I am an optimist, by the way, but I'm very cautious, too. I'm very methodical. And when you hear, as you have, resident after resident, you know, all of my colleagues, I'm sure, have done the same, you know, lambaste you because certain things aren't done. You know, you get to the point where you say, okay, enough already, let's find a solution, okay? And I had been getting it. Actually, to be honest with you, where I live on Moulton Drive, off of Lapeer, 19th Street, by Morley School area, very working class family, retirees in that area, nice neighborhood. I've been living there almost 20 years. And if I go one block away from my house, I see 6 feet tall grass. If I go 2 blocks, either north, south, or, you know, I see that. And my residents see that as well. You know, I took pictures today. I sent city manager some pictures, and I'll give you the address. Trash, couches, it was horrible. I had my 2 grandkids in the car with me, and they said, "Granddad, look, I see things crawling." That was very painful, you know, a 5 and 6 year old. I don't want any child growing up in that filth. It's not right. It isn't. So the plan general plan you shared for implementation, there are going to be, I'm looking forward to the meeting with the county folks so we can maybe look at some finite step-by-step milestones. But no child should have to witness and walk through the neighborhoods and see that. No child. And I think if we have a common thread here, I think we could agree that we don't want that. Okay? So I'm very optimistic in the sense of seeing what you've presented. And I'm very patient as well, as my councilman Clark indicated. It's going to take time. I'm a realist as well. So you have to, crawl before you can walk. But the key is having a strategy, and that's something that was frustrating to me. Year after year, we go through this whole dog chasing the tail. We know the grass is coming, the grass is going to grow, and we never can get it done. Okay? So in that sense, I'm very hopeful, and as I said, we look forward to sitting down and kind of, putting some legs on the wheel in terms of, where you start. The neighborhood quadrants I think would be, if you're doing it in one quadrant, let's do it in all 4 quadrants. I got a list of things here. Let's do it in all 4 quadrants. And I see opportunity too for additional partnership. We all have a vested interest in our community looking inviting, okay, for family, recreational, business, etc. So there are tremendous opportunities for others to partner with us, even financially. If it's going to cost X amount of dollars to do quadrant 1, and you look at each quadrant, how much will it cost to equip and man up the areas where we can address some of those cutting immediacies, and then looking on a long-term basis, implementing those phases in terms of keeping the growth at a minimum. Okay, so I'm hopeful that our business community will look at this. I'm sure if not, will talk to.
Yeah, even the Credit Union Association was the first one to come to us over a year ago and say, what can we do? We want to cut some grass. We
Okay.
want to help out. And we said, well, just, let's not throw good money after bad,
Sure.
but we're going to come to you with a plan.
That's good.
And we want your help in identifying. Like you said, each quadrant, and Phil reminded me to tell you all that we are going to work on that quadrant basis.
Okay.
So not only in the Saginaw High neighborhood, but then who are all the other stakeholders in each quadrant?
Right.
And who's going to partner? Who's
Good.
the main stakeholder? Who's got some cash that they might want to help to beautify? I know Covenant has an extreme interest
Sure.
in cutting and maintaining some of their own property around their hospital. So
Yeah.
I think, like you said, this is a start, but really the plan doesn't get implemented until you go to the people and start that engagement process and really begin to flush out the ideas and
Sure.
the details of how you do this practically on a block-by-block, neighborhood-by-neighborhood basis.
Okay. Okay. I think I have enough information and ammunition to fight a little bit more and to communicate with my constituents in terms of some of the next steps that we plan to do. So thank you very much for that, Mr. Manager. Thank you so much. And Mr. Mayor, that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Mr. Tibbs, you want to take a turn?
If I could, Mayor, please.
Certainly may.
Well, okay, I guess this is, as Councilman Clark said, I mean, it's a plan, and at least that's a good place to start. But I guess, I don't want to sound overcritical, but I guess okay, we're just talking about property that's owned by the county and the city, but there's also land that's privately owned. I was wondering if there's a plan for that. I mean, some of our schools are vacant schools. I mean, the grass it's a problem there. There's, absentee property owners, just, I mean, that's quite a bit of property right there that even if this was implemented 100%, I mean, we still have a pretty big problem. So I guess I was asking about, what
The rest of it.
what about the rest of it?
I think
system that John Stemple and the police and the public safety have been working on is one of the best ways to do that. We do have ordinances for property maintenance, and that's probably the best way that we can enforce that is through the quadrant system, because it dedicates people to specific areas. So I'm sure that's something that Mr. Stemple will be working on, and also working with the neighborhood groups. The engagement is what we want to have with the quadrant system. So when we go to the groups, we want to know what do you want us to focus on. That's one of the key points. When Mr. Stemple developed the quadrant system, there were several leaders of the neighborhood groups involved, and I believe he meets with them monthly, I think. So it's something that we're trying to get the idea, what do you want to see in your neighborhoods. The schools where they've torn down schools, I'll be honest, that's the responsibility of the schools. We'll partner with the schools to share our ideas and help to implement, but they're going to have to come up with money to maintain that property.
And that's why I was mentioning about a task force, is that, you guys, I don't know how you do it, to be honest, on a day-to-day basis. I mean, you guys tackle humongous problems amongst yourselves, but I just suggest that you just open it up a little bit. I mean, there's other people that want to help. I mean, because I think a lot of the banks and realtors, that they own quite a bit of property that are, God bless them. I mean, a lot of them are great city partners, and they do a lot for our city. But, it is what it is. I mean, some of those properties are still underkept. I mean, they got to be part of the conversation. And I asked, I think a couple of meetings ago, about how are we enforcing our vacant property ordinance, and what type of funds are we generating, and how effective is it? I mean, do we need to tweak it? I just think, we're doing a lot of talk, but how Ms. Moore say all the time is, it's like, sometimes you get tired of talking about it. Let's do something about it. But I may have other questions, so I'll just pass. Yeah.
I would also encourage you, Councilman Tibbs, because of your regular job in enforcement, to meet with Mr. Stemple. And I believe it does need some tweaking. We've done major enforcement before and written hundreds of tickets, and a lot of people that get ticketed know the game, and they know that our inspectors can't go to every court date. So maybe we can work with the prosecutor's office or the judges somehow, so that we can make sure that those violations are enforced. But I think Mr. Stemple would be more than willing to meet with you and talk about some of those ideas.
Councilman Clark, go ahead.
Thank you. I know you're all tired of it a little bit, but this is important. This is important. I understand, Tom, that you said you can and will be sending this to everybody on council, correct?
It's too big to email,
All right.
but we'll have electronic copies.
All right, so you can, one way or the other, we should be able to have it.
Yes.
And use it. And that's a key element to me, that we have this, it's really information for the public. And we need to be, as council people, responsible to say, folks, you need to be part of this solution. And here's the problem, here's the cost. We want to stop banging our head against the wall, we want some help. So we need that information. Thank you. That's all.
Oh, a comment. I know that, Mr. Tibbs, Councilman Tibbs, you're right. We put people in jail for income tax. So why can't we make them enforce them with the property taxes as well? Because we do put them in there for income tax if they're so far behind. And it's like, if you're steady sending something out and you're not responding, then what's the next step?
I think that should be another presentation. Code enforcement will be part of this. I mean, we're still going to take complaints on a quadrant basis. There are still going to be writing tickets. Now, whether you can collect on those tickets is another question, but it's part of that community engagement process, as well as soliciting funds and all those kinds of things.
Councilman Falls, did you have another comment?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Would you please?
I mentioned at the Saginaw Future meeting that I know the land bank got some houses. I know Wanagas Credit Union got some money.
That's right.
And we give away over $300,000 in grants every year to help people buy homes and fix up their homes. So maybe we need to start doing a partnership with the land bank and some of the credit unions and the banks to get people in these homes. You know, because there are grants available. It's free money. I mean, we got a grant at the Wanagas Credit Union that we can give people every 5 years. We can give them $7,000 or $10,000 of free money to help fix up their homes. So we need to do some more partnering, and, you know, bring in some of the resources that everybody got to try to help Saginaw a better place and get some homeowners. And
That's the other side of the coin is the urban homesteading program, which is to try and find good working families that need homes that are renters to give them property so that they can be stakeholders in their neighborhoods.
Well, it's people that next tier corporation that works there, they're making anywhere between $12 and $20 an hour for the people that's unskilled. And some of those people are paying $600 a month rent, but they don't think they can own a home.
$700 or $800 even.
Right.
I've heard.
They pay rent, but they don't think they can own a home. And we put out flyers and stuff like that to let them know they can own homes and stuff like that. So maybe we need to start partnering more, you know, to make Saginaw a better place.
Our urban homesteading initiative, we're trying to figure out so that the person could own their home in 5 years and pay $400 for their mortgage payment, and it'd be paid off in 5 years.
Okay, Councilman Clark.
Yes, real quickly, I do agree with the mayor that the issue of the criminal enforcement is really a later presentation, but sort of to jumpstart that, is a real quick history. One of the reasons we don't have as much enforcement ability as we would like sometimes is because a number of years ago, the legislature allowed civil infractions. Many communities adopted civil infraction violations in place of misdemeanor violations. We did the same. The main advantage of it is when you have your civil infraction bureau. Ours is not active. We may want to look at selectively criminalizing, again, certain of these violations. For example, if you don't take care of your property, right now it's a civil infraction, it's a $100 fine. Very little consequence. You know, no one likes the idea of criminal enforcement, but at the same time, it becomes a much larger hammer than a $100 fine. So that, to jumpstart that conversation, we may want to look at doing something along that line. Since we don't have the benefit of the Civil Infraction Bureau in the way it was initially contemplated.
I'm okay with that, but but when you're done now, I have my list. So, because I haven't had a chance yet. So just be patient with me. Just that, and that's exactly. And I need to remind you of that once in a while. Go ahead, Councilman Tibbs. You go ahead.
Okay, I just have 2 points. I'll just make it quick. You talked about 1,500 properties that are adjacent to owner-occupied properties. I could be wrong, but this program has been in place at least since 2010. So I was just wondering, I mean, are we addressing what impediments there are for these adjacent property owners that's preventing them from purchasing it? I mean, is it a marketing issue? I mean, this program isn't new, so I mean, I guess trying to figure out what's
the land bank.
preventing.
The land bank is not new, and the side lot program is not new, but they really weren't broadcasting it. They weren't being active.
Right.
They were really carefully considering, do we just sell property? Should we hold on to it? I think they were really struggling internally what to do with the property. Only recently, in the past 6 months, in this new demolition process, they're realizing that the best way to use this property is to get it in the homeowner's hands. So they've ramped it up. In fact, they sent letters to all those people, inviting them to come in and apply. So you're right, it has been around, but not until the last 6 months has it really been ramped up.
All right. My last point, or last question is, I know MML is our voice for state legislation. I was wondering, do they have a position on this, or I mean, is there something that they're vouching for municipalities like us to address this issue?
I don't think it's an issue that's really taken up. But one of the big changes in the state of Michigan was the land bank, and it does give us an opportunity to work with another local unit of government to try to tackle this problem. If it was the old way where the DNR owned the properties, I can pretty much guess what the state would tell us about maintaining these properties. And I would encourage everyone to not overlook what has happened. Okay, we do have a problem with these lots and the weed growth, but before we had vacant boarded up houses on those lots, which gives us even more problems than the weeds. And that has been a great joint program that we've had with the land bank. I think we really, I'm recognizing a lot more now that we have these programs how much the land bank does on those demolitions, because not something that the city has necessarily talked about or touted in the past, but the land bank plays a huge role in those demolitions. And I think the amount of work that they do with the number of people that they have, the land bank, I believe, is really 2 employees for the most part. And they do a lot of work for us. So the land bank system is something that the state has done to help local units. And I know not every community has that even. And if you go and talk to the state, to MISHDA and some of those groups, the relationship that the city of Saginaw has with the county land bank is probably the best one in the state. I'll tell you that the land bank in Flint isn't looking at these, or Genesee County Land Bank isn't looking at these same solutions, and I believe this year they're going to cut every lot once and that's it.
We're going to
Try to. And that's all they're doing. They're not trying to think of new solutions. And before the mayor goes into his points.
No, we'll be well. We got more hands going up.
I would say that Tom has been our spokesperson here. He speaks like this for a living, but the other members of the group, this is an entire team approach to coming up with this. I've been with the city since 2009, and we've never talked about anything but how can we cut more? And the dollar amount probably has stayed the same with the lots doubling and tripling. So this is the first attempt we've made to come up with an alternative plan than just cutting ultimately probably the same number of lots while the number continues to grow. So the entire staff, I think, has done a great job. And Tom has, it wouldn't be a function of Saginaw Future to do something like this. It's not a typical thing, but I heard some mention of what our department heads doing and what are we doing as a city. Tom is kind of our go-between because our department heads have gone to the land bank and maybe had some interactions that haven't been as cordial as you may think. So Tom is a good intermediary for us. The other thing I got from the presentation is Tom needs to take his girlfriend out more instead of looking at vacant lots in the city all the time.
Why don't you,
Manager, can I add something real quick? Part of this whole program is all
what we're doing, and we've been doing since last year we decided, hey, we're going to cut just the right-of-ways on local streets and still do the entire properties on the majors and state highways. But as we've seen in this presentation, that's not sustainable. But what we were even doing last year, for residents and individuals that didn't realize we weren't cutting the entire lot anymore, we started getting inundated with phone calls. And what we still do is we will go out and cut an entire lot, even though that isn't part of our plan now. But if we have an individual that's living next to a lot that didn't realize this is what we were doing, we take down their name, the date they called, make sure they own the house next to it or are renting it or whatever, and as long as they promise that they will continue to maintain that property, they can't cut it at 4 and 5 feet. We come out, make a couple passes with the tractors and flails, get it to a sustainable level, and then they're going to maintain it. So like when John and I were out cutting, I had a young lady approach me, and I think it was a corner north of Remington on Sheridan, 3-4 blocks north, and she just walked up to us as I was putting new string on the weed whacker, because I went through a substantial amount. I haven't weed whacked in a while, but, and said, sir, hey, who are you guys with? What are you doing? We explained what we were doing. She says, hey, this lot right here, she goes, my kids love to play in it. She says, however, it got so overgrown that my kids can't play in the lot anymore. And I told her the process. I took down her name and that, and we went out and mowed that corner for her so that, her kids can continue to use it as long as she promised to maintain it after we mowed it for the first time. So that is still part of the program as well, and we're going to work through the quad zone and the neighborhood groups with all that as well to let them know that is part of this plan that we will be doing as well. If they would promise us that they would continue to maintain that lot after we get it mowed so it's sustainable. So.
Okay, Councilman Coloris. You got your hand up?
Very, very brief.
Take your time.
No, I'll still be brief, even though I have the opportunity to pontificate. I just want some of the council people to get clarified on one item. The land bank has one person whose primary job is selling properties. And where they can sell a property to a bona fide buyer, they will. So, and if Councilman Balls has any connection with a lending agency that could help a person, I'm sure the two could merge together very nicely and get things done. But that is being done today.
Okay. Good. Councilmember, question? Couple observations that I have. Weed abatement, we have 3 two-person crews.
Currently, we're running with just 5 staff because we haven't had a commitment yet from the land bank. But what we're proposing as part of the plan, 5 staff, which would be 2.5 crews. If I can get a tri-cap person, that gives me the 3 two-man crews. That's correct.
Well, that was my next point, because I seen a bunch of tri-cap this morning looking for supervision, I think. I'm not sure.
Mr. Mayor, we got so many, we got summer youth employment, we got prosecutor, mental health.
If I got 2 city workers and I put 1 tri-cap with them or 1 other one, that's a lot of supervision. And that is much needed, or even one-on-one is much needed. So I was surprised when you said we got the 2-person crews. They should be 3, but yet you and I today noticed we needed to make a phone call and get some people busy with that. So very good. You made a comment about overseeding. Possibly on the old lots that we have, that we could possibly cut and then overseed.
That's right.
In which the clover then would take over, we would hope it eventually would take over. Is that much of a process? I know we'd have to cut the lot completely. Do you have to aerate then and then overseed, or just throw it down?
Nope. You just simply cut the grass down. Now, you can't do it during the summer because you need to do it in the fall or in the spring because you get the water. And it doesn't just have to be clover. It could be ivy. It could be a number of. The state of Michigan's got this cool website where you go and tell them where you live and all of the species that will grow. So that is one thing we're going to try is cut the grass low in the fall, seed the public right away, and see how it works.
This may be far-fetched, but can we partner with mosquito control? Because they got those little planes, and they're dropping mosquito pellets. If they could drop some seed grass, then we might be able to seed a bunch. My other comment, if I could get everybody on Congress Court B to plant clover, we wouldn't have to then keep cutting our grass, because he cut my grass and now it makes my grass look terrible. So we could all be clover over there. We could be the lucky court with 4-week clover. So, Tom, I want to thank you for taking this initiative on behalf of the city, not because of where you're employed, but because you're a citizen and you're dedicated to this city, and you're always looking. You have a vast knowledge, and Tom, and this is each one of us at this council table can solve this problem ourselves, but we just don't have the $1 million that it would take not for every year. I know the Saginaw Board of Education hasn't been cutting their grass, but I also know they have to cut another 7 or 8 million from their budget. And I'm guessing grass cutting is not at the top of the list because they got to cut tremendous amount. Now, that doesn't take away the responsibility. They're still responsible for that. So they're even in the same area that we are And this information may be just critical for us to do that and do what, you know, when we say partner is, boy, we got a great plan. I like your plan, Tom, and that's not your plan, Tom. I know that. That's the committee and the people that put their heads together, but you spearheaded that. It's nice to have that. Our manager knew exactly the right person, I think, to bring this forward. So without any further ado, I just want to applaud you for being that person that's a mediator that goes in between, because I'm going to tell you right now, last week, if Mayor Pro Tem and I would have sat down with the county, it probably would not have been not a good meeting at all. But that's okay, because that's what it's all about. So thank you very much. Mr. Manager, I believe that is it for questions. Is there anything else on management?
That concludes the management update.